right. Well, welcome everybody. It's really good to see you, to be together, to welcome Liz and Maitreya of the Butte Equity Defense Project, but also of PISLAP to our call. Um, so, um, we usually start by kind of going around and just sharing a little bit about there's usually a question we put forward, like what is the state of being which you arrive with today, or it could be another question. Duncan, do you have a question that you might want to suggest, or does that sound good to
Oh,
you? Or I didn't mean to put
yeah,
you on
no,
the spot. It's just you're here.
oh, that's okay. Yeah, I was just thinking maybe one thing that just gives you joy during the holiday season, something like that. Would that work?
That sounds great.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you kick it off?
All right, I'll do that. So I'm Duncan Holloman, and I'm here in chilly Gloucester, Massachusetts, where it's sparkling clear. And last night I attended a wonderful music concert in a candlelit church, which is something that gives me deep joy during this time of year. And so maybe Ben, I don't know you, but how about if you go next and maybe I can know you a little better?
Hi. Um, I let's see, is my mic working?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
it is, Ben.
Uh, Thank you for having me. I think I went to one or two PISLAP events years ago under
You
Gene
did, yeah.
Anselmo's encouragement, and I was very happy to see Liz Latimer's presentation today because I haven't seen Liz in a while. Um, but in answer to the prompt, um, my favorite thing about this season is the Unsilent Night event, which is a public art performance that will be happening in Manhattan this Sunday. It's a musical composition for four channels in many, many different speakers. And so people show up with their boom boxes or their portable amplifiers at Washington Square Park, and on a signal, everybody pushes play on this particular piece of music and begin walking as this big group together through the streets, often the snow-filled streets, from Washington Square Park to Tompkins Square Park over about 45 minutes, which is the duration of the piece. And it's completely non-denominational. It doesn't have a overt religious thing, but it's really about this artistic community that comes together every year to do this. And it's gorgeous. It's a beautiful piece of music, and it's a beautiful way to enjoy the season with 200 other people for that duration.
Oh, that
So
sounds
I will
wonderful.
pass. I will then pass to Marianne.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I disappeared. I've been having real issues with that. And I think I caught the question. What is the favorite thing about this season?
One
Yeah, or
thing that
what
gives
gives you
you joy.
joy?
One thing
Yeah.
that gives me joy. Um, Being here, the spirit of
Mm.
the season, the sort of ambient noise dialed down, but the spirit gets lifted up and it just feels different, and that gives me joy.
Marianne, you want to call on somebody?
Oh, forgive me. I got booted
Yeah,
out.
that's all right.
Um, Maitreya, have you spoken?
No, thanks. Hi, Maitreya Badami here in not as chilly, but 39-degree Chico, California. Not warm. Um, I'm really happy to see you, Nanette, and y'all. I think one thing that really brings me joy is holiday crafting. My kids are 18 and 23 now, and sort of what I established as our traditions when they were young was making things. And so we've already done gingerbread houses 2 weekends ago, and then on Sunday we're doing homemade ornaments, including and snow globes. So those are that's what's on the agenda for Sunday. So I just love it. And then I'll have these things. Some of them are, I mean, a lot of them are terrible. We're not really necessarily that talented, but some of them are just very special, and they're the things that we keep.
Go ahead and call on somebody, Maitreya.
Liz.
Um, Lights, candles. That's what I like about this time. Everything else I don't like. When you asked that question, I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't think there's anything. And we're also socked in with fog here in Chico for this is like the 10th or 12th day. And it's very intense psychologically to be socked in with fog like this. But also the consumerism and just like I've been feeling the pressure of buying stuff, and it's like feels like the season has heightened this like hysteria around purchasing stuff. So yeah, when you asked the question, I felt this like sinking inside, and then I was like, oh, but I do like all the lights and the candles. Different traditions use candles in all different ways, and so yeah, I like the idea of a light in the dark. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Nanette.
All right. Hello, everybody. Nanette Shore. I'm in New York City. Really enjoyed Liz and others' reference to our meetings back in the city. I do believe Ben was part of one of them actually as well. Um, I like there's a sort of atmosphere that's kind of soulful and peaceful in the city around this time in New York. It's both multicultural, multiple holidays being celebrated or not or none, maybe sometimes just the feeling of the season. But it has a soulful sort of spiritual feel that is special, I think. So I do enjoy it. I will pass to Gilly.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Am I on there? Okay, thank you.
You are. You're good.
Okay, I can't see myself, but so I don't know where my camera is, not to worry. I'm kind of new to PISLAP. I've been to like, I think, one PISLAP meeting, and I've been to like a couple of David Hoffman's meetings. So I do recognise, I recognise Duncan Holloman there. I've seen you before in some meetings. I'm based in England in the UK, and I was drawn. I think I found you over the internet. This group. I can't remember how I first found you, but I was drawn to the group. Simply because I've been meditating for 20 years. I've got a background in law. I work in education, sometimes law, sometimes business. And I was drawn to the group because, always been in that kind of quandary about spirituality, law, business, politics, life, and how we reconcile it all. So I just started coming to things and listening and joining in a bit. And so this time of year, for me, the joy, I mean, it's in the evening now for me, and it's dark outside and it's damp and miserable. And I'm warm and cozy on the inside. And tomorrow I've got our Christmas party, which is a drumming group that I go to, and we all practice like African drumming together. And so tomorrow's our day when we'll all drum together and we'll learn an African rhythm, and then jam away all afternoon once we've learned the rhythm. And that is absolutely totally joyful because I can't think at all while we're drumming. We're totally present and totally in the moment. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilly. Welcome. Amber? Hi, Amber.
I'm cool. I'm here speaking to you from Spain, so it's slightly warmer, but still raining and a bit miserable. My favorite thing about this time of year, I think, are gatherings, because I think that with how everybody's always rushing to get from one place to the other, from one commitment to the other, with work, personal lives. It is a time where we do tend to take that extra special attention, I think, and time to sort of reach out to friends we haven't seen during the year and that we want to catch up with. And so for me, it's a gathering of community for in community spaces, for Christmas shows, festivals of light, for gatherings of friends, for gatherings of family, yeah, for Sangha. So that's me.
Great. Thank you, Amber. And Wade? Wade, can you hear us? Maybe not. All right. Well, welcome, Wade. Um, Duncan, thank you for that good question like that. All right, friends. So without too much further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Liz, and perhaps Maitreya will join in as well. Um, Liz has been a longtime PISLAP member. I sent her bio out, so I won't repeat that. But she came to a retreat that PISLAP had a number of years ago, as did Maitreya, and they presented about their work creating the Butte Equity Defense Project, and what inspired that, and the challenges they're facing, and how they're trying to work them through. And they were also asking for feedback and support from the community, which we were very happy to try to give, because it's a magnificent project and deeply important, and all the more so now, I would say. So um, I'll turn it over to Liz to talk with us a while, and then we'll I guess we'll open it up for dialogue.
Great. So it's defense equity, not equity defense. Butte Defense
Oh,
Equity
sorry
Project.
about that. Yikes.
No, it's a great place to start because it means two different things, right? Like equity defense is you're defending equity, and defense
Yeah.
equity is what it is related to that, but it's very specifically related to the fact that poor people um, are incarcerated at a much faster and greater pace and speed and volume than rich people in our country. And so what the Defense Equity Project seeks to get at is why are our incarcerative organizations full of poor people? And if you reject the idea that it's because poor people are more criminal, then you have to like ask the question and see whether there might be points of intervention that we could use our livelihoods to get at. And so Maitreya and I started kind of formalizing the attempt to get to intervene locally here in Butte County, California, many years ago. We both came from other places. I grew up here, but I was gone for a long time. And Maitreya, her career took her through public defense and into the Innocence Project at Santa Clara. And then we both ended up in Chico, kind of around the same time, like 8 years ago, Maitreya, 8 years ago. And so we landed here in this place, which is Chico is a kind of a purple, it's kind of a blue, but mostly purple now city surrounded by very, very conservative, agriculturally minded people. And so what happens when you live here, if you're like us, is you're like looking for like-minded people so that you don't lose your sense of I guess I should speak for myself. I'm always looking for people to keep my spirit alive, my spirit of fighting for justice alive. Because unlike New York, where my experience was that you're just immersed in a general movement toward something better. Here, you're very isolated if you're like a social justice warrior type. And so we found each other, and we both care very deeply about criminal justice issues, mass incarceration, innocence, just racism, all the things that go along with our notion of criminal justice in the US. And we started talking and having coffees and dreaming and sketching in our notepads and getting to know each other. And then that kind of went on for a couple years. And then there came a time, maybe 5 years ago, where we brought in a third partner named Peter Washington, um, who kind of who kind of like his presence kind of catapulted us into a more structured way of being. Both because he has a lot of resources financially, but also the way he thinks is kind of less dream. Like we were dreaming a lot, and then he kind of brought the nuts and bolts. And the three of us worked together for a couple years to develop a strategic plan and like really think like if we wanted this to really take root here, what do we need to do? Um, and so we've been at it in that way, kind of like developing infrastructure and developing a solid foundation based in like trust and grappling with different perspectives and different socioeconomic backgrounds and different trainings and educations and trying to like keep it real at a very like basic level as we grow, which I think is probably one of our biggest challenges is like the speed at which the organization grows depends on, in my view, um, our commitment to not like skipping over some fundamental things. Like how do you imagine equity? How do you imagine like what are we doing if we're not combating our internal inequities and some of the things that we've talked about through PISLAP. So we're growing slowly but steadily. Um, yeah, and so that's kind of all theoretical. And what we actually do on the ground is we represent people. We represent people who would otherwise have a public defender. So we provide direct representation to those folks. And simultaneously, we provide wraparound services, which in New York is like you would never not in my experience at Brooklyn Defenders, like you just have wraparound services once you get arrested. You have a social worker and you have a landlord lawyer and you have an immigration lawyer and you have the things that are attendant with your circumstances of getting arrested. But here you don't have that. So we were committed to bringing that as well. So we have a social worker and nurturing the next kind of college and law school generation of lawyers and social workers, and then trying to make sure that the progressive legislation that happens in California around criminal justice, which there is quite a bit of, is enacted in our local practices. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the Butte Defense Equity Project is. Do you want to add anything, Maitreya?
Just to be more specific, or I guess elaborate a little bit on the next generation part, I'm a full-time professor at Chico State, which is an undergraduate school, and I teach in the legal studies department, but we also have a school of social work, and this is our fourth or fifth year of hosting either a bachelor's or a master's of social work student. Sometimes we've had both. This year we just have a bachelor's student for their year-long clinical practicum. And so that's just been a great opportunity to, cross-pollinate with Chico State, and also these individual students get a unique experience. And I'm currently on a sabbatical from Chico State this semester, and I'm doing a research project about serving the familiar faces, which is a code words for the most frequently arrested individuals in any given jurisdiction. That there's a typical kind of there's like a profile of people that are frequently arrested for low-level misdemeanors such as trespass, drunken public, simple possession of narcotics, often overlapping mental health issues, substance use disorder, precarious, if any, housing. And so that group of people has been studied in various ways by various institutions, and we're trying to do a little research first in terms of what are the services that are currently being provided to this group of people, and how well are they integrating with each other and communicating with each other, and what might be able to add to that mix to help more of those people exit that cycle. So that's it.
Yeah.
Should we jump in with questions, or is this a good moment, or do you guys have more you'd like to share up front?
Yeah, no, questions are good. I mean, we could go off on any number of topics, but if there's any inquiries, that this would be a great time to tell us which direction to go in.
I'm really moved by I just felt such a genuine warmth in the project when I read about it. I'm grateful to be here. Um, I have experience in three different phases. Uh, Actually, Kim Wright interviewed me probably 12, 15 years ago at a reentry program in Kansas City. We had the first mentoring grant of ex-offenders. And so I have that grounded experience, and that's where I just fell in love, and I knew there was something more. But what I see and feel already is that when you see differently, people are different. And so the ability to be broad in the way we really see a human being is that was transformational in our work. And it sounds so simple, but really to be present to a human being. And, I worked with really, really amazing people, but people don't just fall into prison. There is a disconnect in a life. And I live in Milwaukee, and we have the highest population of African American men in prison from the zip code that I served. And I worked at a project that, over and over, there was this disconnect of no community, no whatever. And then on the other side of that coming out, people aren't free just because they can move. Relationships are at the heart of all of this, is what I wanted to say. And so when I really feel that in what you're doing, to come at it not from fixing or giving, it's really being present to people in a way that feels very whole to me. So that's and I do have a question. So boy, does this sound like I never did criminal law, but this sounds like a shady lawyer question. How do you get paid?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a
I
great
mean,
question.
really, if so anyway, that's how do you get paid?
We don't get paid. I mean, we don't get paid. I mean, I make a little bit of money now as the executive director, um, because we've been fortunate to have some donors, like donors with money have supported us so far. We just applied for actually, we didn't just apply. We applied a couple months ago, and we're going to find out this month if we got a grant from the state of California to support the public defenders in a neighboring county to provide to kind of bring the model of it's called the holistic defense, to bring the model of holistic defense into rural California counties. Because where we live, is really, really, really well, most of you, I don't think most of you live in New York, but I came from New York, so I just assumed that when you think about criminal defense, you think about like the wholer person, but here it's not like that. It's pretty old fashioned, and it's pretty based on like these allegations of conduct and are you guilty or not? And if you're guilty, how much time are you going to get? And it's pretty cut and dried like that. So there's an organization here called the Office of State Public Defender in California. They have an Indigent Defense Improvement Division, and they got a bunch of money because I think they've won a lawsuit against the Fresno public defenders. And so they've used that, they've built on that money, and they offer grants to improve services for indigent defendants around the state. So we just applied for a big grant. So if we get that, that'll be just so exciting. Like it'll just be a big, big milestone for us because we've been grappling with how to get funded for, I mean, the whole time, but only for about a year, like in really like, okay, we really have our players, we have our lawyer, we have our social worker, we have our admin people, we're ready to go. We have the foundation laid, and now we need to raise it up. So yeah, funding is a big goal.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we've done up until the last probably half year has all been volunteers. We've just
Yeah.
done everybody just contributes their time. So now we pay Elizabeth for like 8 hours a week, I
Yeah.
think, still not very much. And we pay an admin person for 5 hours a week, and everybody else is still donating their time.
Yeah. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of time that people have put in. Even to write the grant, we had two volunteers who have not worked with BDEP before who just spent hours and hours and hours donating their expertise and brilliance. So that's kind of how we've been rolling so far. Just from people wanting to see it happen and believing in it, you know? Yeah, Duncan.
I am mostly a psychotherapist and recovering lawyer. And I'm really interested in this conversation between social work and criminal justice work. And I was struck by the fact that you have an intern that comes from the Department of Social Work in the project that you guys are working on. And what I'm wondering about is the psychotherapy part of that. That is, I'm guessing that the social work person deals with social services and connects that person up with social services rather than providing psychotherapy. Um, but I'm really interested in what you're noticing then with regard to prevalent diagnoses or mental health issues that you're
Mhm.
encountering and how maybe you might address the relationship between mental health issues and criminal justice.
Yeah, so um well one response that comes to mind is we have this incredible legislation in California um which is called mental health. It's a statute that's called the Mental Health Diversion Statute. And our legislature and our courts of appeals now, the cases are coming out very favorably for folks with who have a diagnosis and it's related in some way to the crime that they committed. You divert, you do not go to jail, you do not plead guilty, you get a robust treatment plan, and then after successful completion of it, your case gets dismissed. And that's law. And it's been around for probably 4 or 5 years. And at first, many of our trial courts all over California were denying these petitions, like we don't have the resources to do it, or the crime's too serious, or who's going to monitor it, or whatever reason they wanted to give for denying the diversion. We're now I think 5 years in, and the appellate courts have just consistently smacked down the trial courts. Have been like, no, the intent of this legislation is to stop incarcerating folks with mental illness, period. And it's to be construed broadly. And if you don't construe it broadly, we're going to send it back, and you're going to figure out how to construe it broadly and give this person services. So it's really profound legislation. And of course you need I think you need a social worker in there to help facilitate. You could have the diagnosis made by an in-house social worker. And I think if we get this grant, that's part of our proposal, is that our social worker who currently works for behavioral health would make a diagnosis and propose a treatment plan and enact it. But typically, we have behavioral health, so they'll make the diagnosis and enact the treatment plan. If you have money, you have your own private practitioner. But it's like hand in hand now under the statute. It's the mental health and the criminal conduct are now like interwoven all the way through. So that's pretty profound for us.
Is there any data that's coming out of that, like with regard to recidivism,
Recidivism.
re,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was wondering the same thing the other day because I'm fighting with a judge about whether this client should get it, and I'm sure there is, and I don't know what it is. It's like it's on the top 10 things of my to-do list. It's like find the data. Yeah.
Liz, is it discretionary with the court ultimately whether they go through the diversion? So the
It's
legislature
discretionary, but
mandates they consider it. Is that it? Is that it?
yeah, but the appellate courts have really been narrowing that
Mm-hmm.
discretion. I mean, to the point where they don't have a lot of discretion now. If these things are
Mm-hmm.
met, you pretty much have to send it if the person has a treatment plan.
Mm-hmm.
And so the judges are chafing a little at that, like, eye rolling, and you put the petition in, and now they're like, well, I guess I have to send it because if I don't, it's a big thing. It's a big, big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying, so that's like one example of what BDEP would be, right? Like we're committed to like being right on the edge of that so that we broaden it and broaden it and broaden it with our direct services. And stay on it. And another example of what we would want to do is like there's also legislation in California called the Racial Justice Act, also very profound legislation, which Maitreya's kind of has a lot more expertise in than I do, but it's designed to remedy the many ways in which race plays a role in the process of arrest through incarceration. And and so that's another example of something like it's not happening. These racial justice act petitions aren't happening in Butte County. It's just not. And so that's kind of one of the reasons BDEP would be here to be like, well, the reason it's not happening is because the lawyers are overworked and it's really complicated legislation and how's it going to work, and so we want to like be the ones pushing that envelope and making sure that there's a avenue for folks to use it here for their clients.
Are there any other states that have that diversion legislation that you were describing? Or is
I don't
California
know.
the leader in that?
I don't
Be an
know.
interesting
I mean, in New
initiative.
York, you have mental health court. I mean, in New
Yeah.
York, if you get arrested and you have a diagnosis, you're going to be sent to mental health court. And then all of the clients that I had at Brooklyn Defenders, we had a social worker for because so many of the issues are surrounding the arrest can't be dealt with by a criminal lawyer. Like social work is such an expertise, so you really need an expert to help the client navigate the problem that is much larger than whatever the fight they got in or the turnstile they jumped or whatever it is. So the social work aspect deals with all of the pieces of a person's life that are unrelated to like what defense lawyers are there to do, which is like protect their constitutional rights. And so a lot of public defenders end up trying to wear all these hats and do things that we're not really experts at doing, which is like psychotherapy and social work. So you need the team. Yeah, Amber.
Hi, I'm was really happy to hear that you call it the holistic defense because I identify as a holistic lawyer. That's my law firm identity, and I work with on my website. I have the way I've done it with clients in the past is that I signpost them to a network of different professionals, and those professionals become collaborators of my law firm. I promote their services for free, but in turn, I also interview them and make sure that if people can't afford their full-on prices, that they will make themselves accessible somehow and offer some sort of support and help. And just one question I wanted to ask you, I don't know if it would be of help or not, is whether or not you've come across any restorative justice programs in your place, in your area, and if you have, if that's supportive of your project and maybe what kind of overlap there could be and collaborations there might be between you. And the other question is if you'd come across therapeutic jurisprudence as well, because there's also a TJ platform, an international one, which speaks specifically actually to the mental health courts, and a number of books, obviously by the late Bruce Winnick and also oh my goodness, I've gone blank. What was the name of the co-founder? Bruce Winnick and David Wexler. Sorry. blip there in my brain in the moment. So, and if you wanted to connect with me at any time and have a separate conversation, I'd be happy to share with you what I've learned in the past 25 years. I litigated as a barrister in Gibraltar for 20 years and started with juvenile justice and the kind of social justice cases that, as you say, puts fire in your belly and wants you to become the warrior. And I can, what you've said resonates with me 100%, that you end up being the person who gives, their kids pocket money to go and buy some crisps and, end up doing the phone calls, after working hours, trying to find social workers who will help or mental health support for suicidal clients, etc. So it is a lot. And we're not trained at law school for any of this. And it very much depends also then on the individual lawyer themselves, on their own set of values, as opposed to this being a standard that's expected of the profession. So anyhow, I don't want to take up too much time, but just wanted to ask you those questions if there's restorative justice programs that you're collaborating with or who might be able to support you, and also TJ, if and leaving the invitation there to connect at another time. Thank you. And thank you both for the work you're doing, Maitreya, too. It's extraordinary, and it's also, I think, quite inspiring as well to know that there's so many other people out there doing this kind of work in different spaces. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to stay inspired, right? Like to remember that there's other people who care about this too. Therapeutic jurisprudence I've never heard of. Um, so I will be contacting you to hear more about that. Restorative justice. Restorative justice. So we have the longest running elected district attorney in California and maybe in the United States. He's been here 47 years. And if you say the words restorative justice to him, his face turns bright red and steam starts coming out of his ears. Like he cannot stomach the thought. And he has quite a bit of power in our small community. So it has not been something that is really utilized in the criminal justice process. Now, um, recently, I learned that we actually have a restorative justice steering committee in Butte County, and it's headed by the head of our juvenile probation department and as well as a couple other like system players who've been meeting on a regular basis. One of our board of supervisors is in this steering committee, and they've been meeting for, I don't know, maybe a year or two, um, to try to develop a model of restorative justice for the juvenile folks in the juvenile hall and the kids who are getting arrested. Now, I did not know about this steering committee, and I just got invited to a meeting on Tuesday. So I show up, and they had invited as a speaker this person who's from the Democratic Republic of Congo, who's like an expert in peacemaking, who got hired at Chico State, our university, to teach basically peacemaking. Um, and so here we were, like in this little room in the probation, like this cement bunker in Butte County, talking about restorative justice with this person who's an expert in peacemaking. And I realized at the meeting that people have been working on this for quite a while and have developed quite a plan, and that our DA has done his best to kind of destroy it. And so we were talking about ways to do it, even if our DA can't wrap his mind around it. So yeah, it's happening. It's not explicit or formalized, but it's definitely happening here. And I was really encouraged and really excited to learn about it. Because again, in Brooklyn, there's a whole restorative justice process, like in the courts. You can make a referral. You just make a referral, and then they go through the restorative justice process. And but here it's kind of been pretty quiet so far. But it's there. It's definitely there.
It's great. I just sorry, just to end, I just say that instead of putting energy into fighting the old, like Socrates said, we should put the energy into building the new. And
Yes.
sometimes when I'm feeling down, because in Gibraltar the jurisdiction is extremely small with 35,000 people, and I've had pushback. Poor Nanette's heard this from me multiple times now. I'm always getting pushback from the powers that be because the narcissistic personalities mainly they're not really interested in anything that's going to not put them up on a pedestal or not give them some sort of income of hundreds of thousands, whatever it is that they're after. And so what we're doing is we're just doing our own thing anyway. And then
Yeah.
eventually, when the time comes, when the right time comes, I'm sure those structures will collapse by the wayside, and hopefully by then we'll be ready because we'll have been doing it for a certain number of time, and the networks will have consolidated. So yeah. And
Yeah.
for RJ, great books by Howard Zehr,
Mhm.
Zehr, Howard Zehr. So he's the main guy who I think picked that up and has written multiple books. But again, we'll speak about it separately. So thank you once again. It sounds positive.
Yeah, it's positive. It's definitely positive. And it brings up like you brought up a really one of the tensions that we live with and work through all the time is being inside the system while trying to also keep our ideas about progress alive because they don't live inside the system. They live outside the system. And so that's been a challenge of like, how do we are we as educators and lawyers are deeply informed by our education and training. Like, there's no way you're going to make me not not a system player and a system thinker. I just am because of how I've grown up and what I've done. And yet we're trying to do something different. So there's always this tension of like, you know, you want to bring into, I guess, like I was thinking we want to bring into the fold non-system players to be part of the team because it's just hard for us to like break our minds outside of standards of practice and milestones and timelines that we just grew up like so deeply adhered to.
I wonder, Liz, in terms of the restorative justice, if, just thinking of that whole concept of laying the seeds, it's great to hear about this group, but maybe also are there people in local communities that are interested in restorative practices so that you sort of get some community awareness or some basic training in holding circles started so that, when the time comes that you do have a DA who is more supportive or the current DA is, experiences pressure around this, that, you've already got something ready to spring into action. That was just something that occurred to me.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Um, I had another question. Oh, Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on this issue of training in law schools because Amber was mentioning we don't get training in doing this. Elizabeth said the same thing. And PISLAP has as one of its pillars the trends, yeah, the shift in training toward the values that PISLAP adheres to. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that. That is, if you were going to add a course to law school, what would it be?
I mean, my law school is where I met my meditation teacher who had a grant to work inside the law school to provide mindfulness practices, and they developed a contemplative law program. Um, yeah, because anytime you're inside of a school, anytime you're inside of the structure, there's going to be measures that are inconsistent with people's actual lived experiences, right? Because we're always trying to put measuring markers inside of schools and institutions and courtrooms. Like it's just, it somehow has to be measured, people's progress as they move through. Like, so I mean, it's almost like I would add a class called How to Defeat Law School. Like, I don't know. I don't know. That's a great question. That's a great question. Like, what class would you do to develop an awareness for students that the law school is not the end all be all. It's simply like it's a tool in your belt. But if you could nurture law students' individuality and creativity instead of like trying to conform them all, that would be an interesting class. Is like make sure you don't care too much about your grades because that's not really what you're here for. But like instead, it's like you got to get the grades or you're going to fail out. So I don't know. I don't know what the class would be.
UC Berkeley has been providing non-credit mindfulness workshops and reading lists and materials like that for students since 2012. That's my alma mater. Um, on credit, I think they had a tester seminar once that was a one semester for credit. But yeah, it certainly is. There's an awareness that there needs to be some additional support for law students beyond the traditional grind them down to a fine dust and then funnel them into a corporate law firm structure that was like when I was there in 1991. So it's a little bit better, the mainstream. We have a tiny little law school here in Chico, Cal Northern, that is a part-time program. Everybody is a 4-year night school student. It's very small. I think they graduate 30 students a year or less, somewhere about that. But they have certain benefits. Obviously, pretty much everybody's working full time, and they have a very high bar passage rate, significantly higher than any of the mainstream law student schools because they really train people to pass the bar exam. And I mean, it would just be really interesting the idea of they are so nuts and bolts. They are so, teaching people how to pass this test and the basics of law in a way that the more ivory tower law schools are a little more disconnected from. That it would be really interesting to talk to their dean about bringing in, holistic defense into a criminal law class or mindfulness into any part of their curriculum. Haven't really ever thought about it because I know they're pretty regimented because they're trying to get their students through. But anyway, it's an interesting thought.
Marianne?
Thank you. I don't know if you can put this in your grant proposal, but I hope it gives you hope. When we worked in Kansas City, 89% of the population had co-occurring disorders, mental health, and substance use and abuse. The recidivism rate in Missouri hovered around 35%. And they defined recidivism as essentially creating the same type of crime where parole would be revoked. In our program, we did mentoring, but we also did case management and referrals. But the development of relationships, pro-social, was really the focus. The recidivism rate in our program moved to 6%.
Wow.
After probably, I think, first grants were very small, 25,000 each. Then we got grants from the Department of Justice and Labor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always a struggle to confine the nuance of a relationship to a figure, to something that could be counted. But when in Rome, we did what Romans needed to see. And I
Right.
still remember going out to these places speaking and feeling like my words dropped right there. And so uh, certain certain populations responded when you could say it's cheaper. Look at this.
Yeah.
So I just want to share the hope with you that it is not, it is all of this The messiness, the beginningness, the concreteness. It's all of it, but it's beautiful work and it is way possible.
Thank you
And if
so much.
there's anything I could do, I'd be happy to support it.
Thank you.
And if anybody should feel free to put their email in the chat if you'd like any follow-up or offer to help. And I can be a conduit for that. I had a question as well, Liz and Maitreya. So, from PISLAP has long had a deep interest, as you both know, in the work of the Georgia Justice Project. And, we've highlighted their work quite a bit and, certain
Yeah.
components about it, but particularly the building of community with clients, the sense of continuity in terms of relating to them, throughout not only before, at the time of their arrest, but also as they reintegrate into community if they're convicted. And then also there's an interesting dimension where they have clients sign a contract before accepting representation. So that's conditioned on certain client actions so that there's a sense of mutual shared responsibility. So I wondered whether as your model is evolving, and it's fascinating to hear how it has evolved since I last heard you talk about it, what are your thoughts about some of these aspects of GJP? Obviously, you don't have the resources to fully implement that, but is that an aspiration, or where do you stand with all of that?
Yeah, I mean, GJP is kind of our North Star. Doug is like one of our deeply loved and beloved mentors. He's always available to us. We've gone out there and done a week immersion with them. So yeah, I mean we're pretty much in fundamental ways modeled after them. So yeah, we're not assigned counsel. We believe that a person should have a choice, and if they don't have money to make a choice like the rich do about who represents you, then there has to be some kind of other buy-in, right? And I think back in the early days of GJP, it was like a work trade program, and now it's more of a collaborative process of yeah, the client has to be ready. I hate the words ready and willing, but like I'm going to use them here because I think it conveys what I mean. But like the buy-in is the person's willingness to work hard to kind of like pivot toward a different direction than the justice system is kind of my understanding. And that's all detailed in those first meetings between with a social worker and a lawyer and the client. And it's truly collaborative from the beginning. And that is our model. Um, yeah. There GJP is like what we want to do. Yeah.
And do you think there's some receptivity to the idea when you think of these grant proposals you're writing to, I know the wraparound model is more established, but the idea of the continuity where you're connected to the client, even if they're in prison, you're visiting them. You're connected to them afterwards. You're supporting them as they re-enter. Is that an aspiration, even if you haven't, yet implemented it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
for sure part of our model is once you're our client, you're our client for life. But
Yeah.
you do make a good point that I don't think we emphasize that or maybe even put it into our last grant application. And it does distinguish GJP from other holistic models of defense. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's very unique. Bruce has his hand up. Bruce
Um,
Peterson.
Hi. I've hesitated to say too much because I apologize. I got held up and I was late. Didn't hear the description of the project, but I remember very well, Liz, when you and Maitreya were here a couple of years ago, and it sounds
Yeah.
like you've been forging ahead, so congratulations. And I
Thanks.
had a couple of thoughts and a question. It's really burning in my mind because you have this DA, 47 years. We actually have a former public defender who's the DA now, who's very receptive to public to restorative justice. But I've
Mm,
dealt a lot with other officials and the public with respect to restorative justice and treatment courts and holistic practice. And what comes up is something that I think Mary Ann put her finger on her tongue on when she first spoke, which is the way you look at a person very broadly.
Mm-hmm.
I call it three-dimensional versus two-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is the public, and this is human nature, we hear others, narco terrorists or murderers or rapists or whoever, it's just a term, and that elicits an emotional reaction from people about others. Now, what happens, and it's happened to me many times over the years, and as a prosecutor and judge and federal defender, when you get to know somebody, your view shifts from two-dimensional to three-dimensional, and
Mm-hmm.
you see the potential, you see the hope, you see the trauma. By the way, Duncan, my experience, I've dealt with many people, and it's emotion, it's ACEs, it's PTSD and impulsive behavior driven by long histories, various kinds of abuse and adverse experiences. But
Mm-hmm.
so the question is for you, Liz, how you shift people's views from one dimension, from two-dimensional to three-dimensional. Now, one thing I do in my class, I teach a class that includes holistic practice and mindfulness training
Mm.
At the U of M Law School, is I bring in people who have been through drug court, people who have been through restorative justice, people who have been in prison for many years, lost their families, lost their health, lost everything, and then they were transformed by people seeing them and believing in them.
Yeah.
So, how do you transform the people you're up against from viewing your clients as two-dimensional threats and transform them instead of that into three-dimensional people? And that's
Mm-hmm.
the challenge that I see all the time.
Yeah, and that's the work of a trial lawyer, right? That's the work of speaking to a jury about a situation and filling out
Mm.
that's one of the ways that you do it is in your direct representation when you're representing someone to like paint the paint the dimensions in. So because everyone
Mhm.
understands once you start talking about people, like people understand people, right?
Mhm.
Um, my law school clinic professor, Gail Gray, on our first day of clinic, she she instead of a syllabus, she handed out a packet of painting of prints from Kehinde Wiley. I don't know if you all are familiar with Kehinde Wiley work, but if you're not, look him up. Kehinde Wiley, I'll put it in the chat. And Kehinde Wiley had done this series of paintings called Passing Posing, and he would approach kids on basketball courts in New York, in the Bronx, or wherever, all over the boroughs. And he would show them a book full of portraits, like portraits of white men on like horses, or like, you know, the very moneyed, the very rich who'd had their portraits taken. And he would ask the kids to pick their favorite one, and then Kehinde Wiley would paint the kid in lieu of the person in the picture. He would repaint the kid as the
Cool.
the the figure. And so she handed us these, and she's like, all I want to ask you this whole semester is, can you be Kehinde in court? Like, you must take on the work of reframing the illustration in the people you are talking to. They're carrying an illustration in their head of your client, and you must be able to tear that down and repaint it. And so it's the same question, like, how do you make someone 3D, or how do you replace the ideas and pictures that people carry about what it means to be poor or black or whatever it is? And how
Or
do you do
beauty.
that how do you do it with a DA? That's the hardest place because he's not stupid. He's been around a long time. Like his ideas about people are very entrenched. And so when I approach my DA and I'm like, yeah, but you're not seeing the person for who they are, it's that's a conversation that may or may not bear fruit in terms of redefining the person because he already has his idea about what I'm doing, right? And I already have my idea about what he's doing. So like kind of like getting underneath all those layers of identities and everything to be like to try to bring humanity into the conversation is the work. And with a deeply entrenched adversary, I don't have an answer. I don't know.
Let me just raise one other concept that's I've been working with a lot lately, which is denunciation. The public wants crime to be denounced. And
Mm,
somehow, seeing a three-dimensional person and supporting and fulfilling their potential doesn't, in the public's mind and in a lot of law enforcement officials, it doesn't adequately denounce the terrible thing that has been done. So what
mm-hmm.
we have to do is be able to show that our work and the difficult, emotionally painful work of accountability and remorse and healing is
Mm,
as denunciatory of the crime as locking somebody in a prison cell, letting them sit there
mm,
day after day and time goes by. So
mm-hmm.
I,
Mm-hmm.
I don't envy your situation, but I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. And thank you for your insight. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Nanette, are you muted? Am I frozen?
Nanette is muted.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I just lost connection for a moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just asking. I wasn't sure who was still wanting to speak because I see Jilly, Amber, and Marianne with their hands up. So,
Okay. Can I go next?
sure,
Thank
please.
you. Okay. Really interesting listening to the conversations, about meditation, mindfulness. Can we bring it into legal education? How do you like help to prepare lawyers, for what they've got to face in practice? And I just wanted to bring in, a little bit of experience that I've had because I spent some time working, with serious substance misusers. And at one point, I was getting so frustrated that there was no change really in them, And I did some voluntary work then with I went to a halfway house of women who had come out of prison, and I went once a week and I sat with them and I meditated, and it was just a few women in the house. And after the first week, they didn't turn up. The second week, I just had two, and the third week, I just had one woman, and I sat and meditated with her every week, one evening a week. And she was a very scary woman because she'd done some very scary things and terrified some people. And I just sat with her and meditated. And that's all we did. We'd have a little chat and a cup of tea, and I'd go. One week I felt quite scared. I thought, gosh, what are you doing? But what I realized is the week after, she said to me, she said, I felt really scared last week and I don't know why. So she'd actually got in touch with her feelings and stopped disassociating from those feelings. And then a few weeks later, she said to me, Jilly, what I did was wrong, wasn't it? And I said, yes, it was. And I just thought, job done, job done. So, in a way, I haven't had very much experience of doing that. I was just reaching out, trying to, uh, how do I help people? Which group of people to help? Who wants the help? And, you know, it doesn't really suit everybody. But from that experience, I took a lot from that. Just the experience of just by meditating with a person, not
Mm,
discussing, not judging, not correcting them, just helping them to sit still and get in touch with themselves and that natural occurrence and realization took place. So I was also thinking something I would really like to do is I would really like to, help people with their meditation, uh, you know, to improve or change or cope or develop or whatever. And if you were looking for somebody to do those sessions, obviously it would be on Zoom sessions. It wouldn't be in person because I'm here and you're there. is I would be really happy to do that. And I don't want paying. I would be really happy to do that, like with your client group, if you were able to do that, I'm sure within your regulations, etc. So yeah, if you think about that one, bear that one in mind, because I'm up for that.
That's so beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do think that the ingredient to really change something is something that we can't really pinpoint or define, because it's like when I show up with a client who's done mindfulness work or whatever, has engaged in some form of like um insight development, it just feels different in court. And it's not something I can ever necessarily describe, but there's something to it, so that when the words are spoken, mine or my clients, it lands differently with a judge or a jury. So I do think that the mindfulness piece is very important to making things more authentic and more, it just lands differently when it's coming from a real place.
I think there's some sort of it's hard to define it like you say, but there's some sort of energy shift that takes
Mhm.
place, and an awareness that takes place, and then that emanates outwards to make a difference on the wider scale, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Amber, did you want to? I think we'll probably wrap up after
Yes, I
Amber.
just wanted to give two
And
quick feedbacks. One was on the legal education part, because Bruce mentioned obviously his work. And of course, I ought to have mentioned earlier J. Kim Wright, who is also part of PISLAP and is pioneering in legal education and holistic law and practices across the globe. And she has on offer a wealth of experience and programs and so on conscious contracts and other such things. I can connect you with her. I also wanted to mention that I'm on the advisory board at the moment for the International Bar Association, and we're working on well-being and legal education. And so there is an overlap between what we're now looking at in terms of piloting new modules for universities and law schools across the globe. And we actually have a pilot program as well. So I don't know if you or your colleagues might be interested in reaching out with me again for me to put you in contact with some people who are already working on that as part of the team. Um, and I'm also, this is not like an advert, but I'm putting together courses of my own on holistic law, because I keep on getting asked every time I go somewhere to speak, or I share my vision. People say, "Where's your book? Where's your book?" And or where are your courses? So in 2026, I will have my courses out, and it's 7 steps to how you become a holistic lawyer. And the 7 steps are not limited to civil litigation or criminal. They're basically practices that can be applicable to any law student and lawyer. So if you're interested in that as well, I can put you on the list. And just one final comment was that in terms of system, one thing I've learned is that systems protect themselves, and they protect themselves and they sustain themselves in order to survive, to continue surviving, even if the dysfunction is so blatantly obvious that we now have, all sorts of different surveys coming out about lawyer well-being and mental health and all sorts. And one of the feedback I got from one of the spaces that I spoke at, and this is going back 10 years now, when I started talking about the holistic approach, and I had been invited to speak as a barrister at law, as an attorney, a litigator, and they said the first question that came from the audience was, "So you're doing yourself out of a job?"
Mhm.
So basically, if we're helping clients to find that space of awareness, as Jilly has been mentioning, of healing, as Duncan has also spoken about, then what we're going to find is that they're not going to reoffend. I think Marianne was explaining how, she had all this amazing success with having recidivity down to 6% of the group. So of course, when I met one of my colleagues down outside the courthouse some years back and asked him how his day in court had gone, he said, "Oh, it was hugely successful. I had such a great day." So, "Oh, how come?" And he said, "Oh, because I was with my favorite clients." And I could feel my heart already starting to like beat slightly faster. I thought, no. And I said, why is he your favorite client? And he said, because he's always reoffending. And so, helps me make my monthly budget.
Mm.
So these are the kind of mindset shifts that, you were talking about, sorry, was Bruce talking about the 3 dimension versus the 2 dimension and so on. And these are the kind of shifts we want in awareness, but I don't think that awareness can come, as somebody was mentioning, only by mindfulness. Mindfulness is certainly it's an incredibly powerful tool, but it's also, I think, I agree with Bruce, it's about changing the lens. And the only way we can do that is by bringing humanity. Somebody mentioned earlier, bringing humanity back in. So anyway, if that's of you, so I think that sometimes we get pushback, or we get these kind of personalities that are not receptive to the kind of change, which for me I see as evolution. It's just the justice system in evolution. That's all that's happening. It's remember not to take it personally, not to be too disheartened, and not to sort of think, oh, what's the point? It's to just carry on in your own lane, because the numbers are growing and the groups are growing and the awareness is growing and the light is spreading and the connections are being made. So from the time I started looking at this 25 years ago till now, I've seen the massive wave of numbers of lawyers dropping out of the profession because they're dissatisfied. And just one last point is that in the UK, Law Care, Julie Jones, you might know about this, Law Care, the charity just came up with a 2025 survey result, and it said that they had asked lawyers, what their 5-year goal was, to the junior lawyers, I think this was, and their 5-year goal is to actually leave the law. And so
Yeah.
I think that's extremely telling, but I don't think it's leave the law. That's where many of us have been. I myself was, and easily about 15 years ago, I thought, that's it, I'm done. But then I kept on thinking, well, I'm not really done, because I enjoy what I do. I find a great amount of satisfaction in helping social justice cases. And so it's not that I don't like what I'm doing. I don't like the structure, the environments in which this is being forced, couched. So again, I think that it's a matter of carrying on and joining with the networks and growing in that way and getting the support you need, and just kind of listening to the feedback, but not giving the noise too much attention, because it's just the system protecting itself. Yeah. And thank you once again.
Thank you, everyone. I think there's a lot more we could delve into. We could probably easily spend another hour, and some profound questions have been raised. And I think the model that BDEP is developing, I think holds within it the potential for real, for giving clients the kinds of support that that at least lay the groundwork for that shift in dimensional lens that Bruce was talking about. So it's very powerful work, and I just want to thank you, Liz, for the work and for talking with us about it. And when I send out the recording, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to send a little note that says, if anybody is interested in donating to the work of BDEP,
Yeah.
please get in touch with PISLAP, and I will pass it on to you. It's
Perfect.
wonderful.
Yeah. We always need money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Best wishes for the holiday season,
Yes.
the new year.
Yes.
Thank you. Happy Christmas.
Peaceful times.
Have a nice
Bye.
day. Bye, everyone. Thank you.